All right, so we'll be talking about Puppet modules today. Before we get started here, how many folks are using Puppet today? Yeah. Okay. How many folks are here because they don't yet use Puppet in production and they're trying to figure out if Puppet's the right tool or what's going on with that? So still a fair amount of folks here just trying to see if Puppet's right for them. So I'll talk about how I got started with Puppet. And so I worked on a small engineering team, about 8 people, for an ISP in Seattle called Speakeasy. Has anyone ever heard of that? I use like the speed test, that stuff. Cool. Right on. So like when I was there, I would go out to lunch with my fellow engineers. We would talk about, well, if we only had like 2 LDAP systems instead of 3 or 4, like life would be a lot better. Or if we didn't spend all our time fixing those broken mail systems, then maybe we could do something else. And so we churned through some employees. We were always fighting fires. When we went to change review boards, it was like running the gauntlet. We got beat up every time. Like, does anyone have these experiences? Right? And so we started this new project, and of course new projects are always a great excuse to get new technology. And we started this carrier grade, like nationwide VoIP system, and we had no repeatable builds. We had some rsync and shell scripts. Is that sound familiar? Yeah. There was a wiki, and its documentation was always correct, right? Yeah. And so we all like realized like that's like not gonna fly. Like we've got this huge project, we've got to have Kit in a bunch of cities to support VoIP, and then the deadline keeps getting brought closer and closer, right? Like that never happened. And so I started looking at different configuration management tools. Well, like first I looked at how do we even build a system. I highly recommend Cobbler if you're actually doing like physical like systems. So at the time, this was 2007, 2008, we looked at Beacon-Fig2, which you had to code everything in XML, which will make your eyes bleed. So that was like instantly out. There was CF Engine 2, and there was this new thing called Puppet. And within 30 minutes, I made Puppet do something useful. And I said, well, let's go with that, because I can actually make it useful. Fast forward a bit, we invested 1 person on the team's time to just doing automation. And then what happened was we started to get ahead of the curve. So we weren't always fighting fires. And that was the huge thing. So like the morale on the team like went up. Instead of being just a cost center, which is what system bids are, which is another way of saying it costs the company lots of money, we were able to actually build products that could be sold. We weren't spending all our time fighting fires. And so for me, it was a great experience by investing in automation. We were able to really like get ahead. And that's what Puppet did for me and why I've stuck with it today. So I hope that doesn't keep happening. Yep. All right. So that's how I got started with Puppet. After doing that for some years, I was in pro services for Puppet Labs. Worked there about 3 years, helped write the first certification, and now I do my own Puppet consulting. They've got a ton of jobs available, so if you're looking, it sounds like they're hiring. So what I do is run a small consulting firm, and I offer a training course that differs from Puppet, and that it's a 2-day course where we learn how to write spec tests. So if you're curious how to write unit tests for your Puppet code, take a class on that. Great. They let me run loose up here on the podium, so I'm totally going to plug my conference I'm organizing quite shamelessly. So if you want to get some sun like next month, come down to Orlando. There's going to be a day of tutorials and 2 days of speakers, 5 tracks. You'll see folks there. And just curiously, is anyone here going to LISA in Seattle this year? Yeah, awesome. Well, great. We'll see you there. I'm going to be there, and James Turnbull, another ex-public is there as well. Great. So let's jump to what is a module. Right? How many folks here have written a module? How many folks here have written a module and then found out there's already one on the Forge that does what you just built? It's probably like a million times better. Yeah. Hold in there. How many folks keep all of their modules in one repo, like one Git or SVN or something, repository? Yeah. Like all of your data and stuff's in there, right? Okay. That's most of the folks here. So let's explain what a module is. So self-contained directory structure, and it encapsulates something. When you're writing your modules, you want to think about what's the smallest amount I can break something into. So you don't have a module for your web server, but you have maybe a module for Apache, a module for Passenger, or for MongoDB, or like whatever. And so it's always better to have smaller modules than these huge modules that do a ton. So sort of like the Unix way with tools, let's build something that does one thing right. Each module has metadata, and so this is an example module file that shows metadata. He says, oh, this is being deprecated for use of metadata.json. Has anyone had to write this before? Yeah. Right on. You'll notice one thing. I don't think I've given a talk in the last year without shoehorning this topic in, and so I'm going to do that again, which is semantic versioning. And so if you learn nothing else from my talk today at all, or from the day at large, read semver.org and learn what this versioning standard is. All of the Puppet Labs tools all use semantic versioning, and it will make your life a ton easier. These numbers actually mean something, and they're not just like written up. Okay, back to modules. So we've got metadata about our module, and so the different tools that we use can use this like metadata to build dependency trees, and to be able to query this. Is anyone here using a skeleton to create their modules? Yeah. Are you using Gareth Musgrove's? No? Like write your own? Yeah. And so what the skeleton does is when you type Puppet module generate, it can, like you can put your own bits in there. And so you can check mine out on GitHub here. I've been working to get a lot of this merged in. It's the de facto thing that happens when you generate a module, but I think there's still some differences in there. This is really beneficial, and whether you use the default Puppet one or you use your own, I highly recommend doing this within your organization, and it'll give a lot of consistency to how your modules are throughout your code base. So they'll all have licensing files, they'll all have a certain layout. Cool. To generate a module, we're just going to run Puppet module generate, our Forge name, and our module name. The Forge name is your namespace on the Forge, and that's how we differentiate my SSH module from your SSH module. So you'll want to sign up on the Forge to get that. So here's the components of the module. So we see things like manifests, where we're actually going to put the code, and that's only a small part. There's a bunch of other things that go along with there, like the metadata, fixtures for spec testing, things for continuous integration like premise, for testing rather. And so, in the beginning, things were really simple, and we just stuck everything into one repository. And it sounds like probably a third to a half of people are doing that today. And so this was the best practice. Luke Kinese sat with me and helped me puppetize the code, shove everything in one repo, and that's the way the world was. But like that was 2008, so like way better like methods to take care of that, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So having ran a large production code base with everything in one repository, I can wholeheartedly tell you it's awful. And so I spent a lot of time banging my head against the keyboard. Everyone has to be on the same release cycle. So if you're one small team, this totally scales to you. As soon as you have someone else that wants to use one of your modules, it becomes a tricky dependency issue because you're not releasing individual modules, you're releasing all of your modules together as one thing. And so maybe I want to upgrade Apache, but I don't want to get all the other upgrades that you have. Well, I'm not so often. So it totally doesn't scale past you. And so once other people are on your team, and especially to give you the mindset of we're releasing a module and we're going to support that module, its functionality, as opposed to all the modules together. Yeah. So it's really easy to get started, right? That's why we all did it, right? You just shove it all in there and git commit done. Yeah. So the cons, it definitely promotes forking. You will get stuck in merge shell, and everything has to be released at the same time, or else you got forking. Yeah. So we want to avoid this totally and have a separate repo for each module. So the rest of my talk is going to be what are the different technologies that we can use now that we have a bunch of different repos. For the folks that have all their code in one repo again, are you also using code that was written by somebody else? Maybe you download something from a couple apps? Yeah. Yeah. And so who actually updates that stuff? Or once it's in your big repo, do you ever update it? My guess is no, because all your modules work together, and so you're not updating that one thing. Which means when you do want to go update it, there's a huge delta, and now it's an even bigger risk, and we want to move away from that. So the first tool for this is the Puppet file. And so this is a file format written by Tim Sharp of GitHub. And what it does is it lets us list our different modules and tells us where we can download them and what version to get. And so here we see I've got a module NSCD. I'm telling it to use Git. I'm giving it a reference tag at version 1.0. And so with the metadata in this file, I can download NSCD at a specific version. Yeah. You can also reference the forge. So here I'm using Puppet Labs forge. You can also mirror the Puppet Labs forge and use an internal forge. The big thing about this is that it can be validated, and so I can check that it works, and I can keep this file under version control. And so instead of having this one modules repo with all my code in it, and code I copy in from all over the net and then never update, I can instead keep this one text file under version control, and then I just modify it. It also means I have a history in the log that actually means something. If you have all of your code in one repo and you look at your commit log, it's garbage, right? There's nothing useful in there. And so with this, we can say, here's when we released, to production, or here's when we did this or that, and so you get definitely better commit logs. So let's see, I'll come back to this, but I run a repo called Honeycut Puppet modules, and in it I keep a Puppet file of all the code that I use every day. And so these are modules that I've written, other ones other folks have, but it's all code that I use and I depend on for myself and that I support with my customers. And so if you want to use this code, then you'll be on a similar code base, and we'll talk about how to do that. What is the module path? So let's talk about that. How many folks here are using Puppet less than 3.6? You're using Puppet, yeah? Okay, and how many folks are using post 3.6? Yeah. 3.6 or higher? Right on. So about 50-50 here, upgraded. Right on. How many Puppet 2 again? Yeah? Yeah. So, pre-3.6 we had a simple module path. And the way the module path works is just like a path statement in Unix. It's going to try each section and it's going to stop at the first match. So if I look up the Apache module, it's going to look at etc Puppet environments, my environment, /modules. If it finds it, it stops. If not, it looks at etc Puppet modules. And so what the module path lets us do is one variable interpolation. So you can see I've got $environment in there. So this lets me have different support for environments. I can set the environment setting in my Puppet conf, and that changes what directory modules get read off of the disk. I can also separate things by different teams. So let's say I've got a team that's doing more core OS things. I can put them at a certain spot in the module path, and then I've got another team that's working on separate apps. And so they might want all of their code to get loaded first, and if they don't have code for a specific operation, then it goes to the other team. So whichever one I put first in the module path, that's what's going to get access first. So you can use that to control whose code gets loaded. If you upgraded to 3.6, you probably saw this warning. If you haven't upgraded yet, you will see this warning. And so it's saying module path is deprecated. What? And so now the way to do it is you have a base module path and an environment path. And so environments are more first class like citizens, since Puppet 3.6. So basically, etc Puppet modules might just have what's base modules or modules that are available to every environment. And under etc Puppet environments, you have the directory structure of each of your environments. And so you could have dev, production. Here I've got a topical environment, Dixon, or something. And then underneath of each of those, we've got manifest and modules. So the Honeycut modules that I talked about, I set that as my base module path when I'm working with folks, and that way they get all of this code that just works, and then if they want to use any of their code, it's closer in the module path, so it gets loaded first. So I've got an SSH module, but if you want to use your SSH module, you can still use all the rest of my code, but since your module path is before mine, yours gets loaded instead of mine. So let's move on to the Forge. How many folks here have a username on the Forge? Yeah? Awesome. If you're writing code, then highly recommend signing up for a Forge account. It's a great way to publish your code. It's not just on GitHub or wherever you keep it, and we can all see it and search for it. So Public Forge is managed by Ryan Coleman. So you can get at Ryan Coleman if you want to send in info. And the Public Forge, this is a repo of public code, and it does dependency tracking, and that's the Forge's like big thing. So you can go there at forge.publiclabs.com. It lets you search for things based on different like metadata as well, which is very handy. It also has a command line interface to it. So I'm going to search for OpenStack, and I see there's a ton of OpenStack stuff on the Forge. So like now I don't have to go and write my own. I'll just download something from there. I can actually download it to the CLI as well. So now I'm going to download Public Labs, their OpenStack module, and OpenStack. If has anyone ever like worked with it before? Okay, so there's like a million components, and so we see here that it has figured out what all these other modules I need to support this. So as you can see, there's a ton, and it gives me a dependency tree, so I can see well. Why is SignND being like pulled in? Rsync needs it. Swift needs Rsync, and I can see what's going on, as well as what are all the versions necessary to make that happen. And so the Forge is figuring this out based on the metadata for each like module that's recursively going through building that dependency tree. Now, if I looked into, I have all my modules there. Yeah. You can search by metadata. Give that a try here. So we see there's like a ton of SSH modules. Let's see how many support sluts. Like, does anyone actually use SUSE here? One person? Sorry. That'd be a recovering SUSE support group at the more. All right, so you can search by metadata. If you have code on the Forge, the metadata is still fairly new, and so if you haven't put that in, I encourage you to do so. It lets people find your code a lot easier. Is anyone using Puppet on Windows? Yeah, we've got a few souls in the back of the room there. Probably other folks who just don't want to raise their hand. I don't blame you. I recently had to do some Windows things, and I know like nothing about Windows. And so through using the Forge, I was able to leverage a bunch of work done by OpenTable, who's a Windows shop, and they have a ton of code up there. And so for me, knowing like nothing, I was able to use that code and get a domain controller set up and going, which is really huge for me, knowing like nothing about that stuff. So the code's out there. You definitely don't want to reinvent the wheel. If you can, definitely, instead of writing your own module, see if there's one out there that does what you want. And if it does kind of like what you want, submit a pull request. These things are open source. Most of them are on GitHub, so definitely contribute back. So the pros for using the Forge, it's great to find like new modules. You can filter by OS and Puppet version, as well as like Puppet Enterprise. You can install from the command line, and it resolves the dependencies for you. The cons is that if you just install from the command line, then there's no record of what you did, right? And so we want to codify what modules you use into the Puppet file. That way you've got something that's checked into revision control. You know like when it changed, as opposed to just typing commands. There's also some bugs in resolving dependencies, but fixes have been flowing in for that, so I appreciate those. So, like my analysis is, I use the Forge to find modules, and so it's a great way to find things. I'll install from the command line, like we did here, because it shows me all the versions, and so this is handy for me, especially if something has a few dependencies, to get a hold of kind of what versions I need. And then you can use the Forge in your Puppet file to actually get the code, which is what I would recommend. For folks looking for jobs in open source, I hired somebody off of the Puppet Forge at my last consulting job, and so this is the automating like Windows thing that I didn't want to do because I don't know anything about Windows. So I definitely use the Forge to find people that do like more than me and then I do it. So there's that. Librarian Puppet is the first tool, and so this is a tool written by Tim Sharp, agent of the Puppet community. It will go through the Puppet file and then resolve all of the dependencies like for you. And so you can just list only the modules that you actually care about, and then all the dependencies that are things you don't really directly care about, you don't have to list, right? So same thing with like working with packages for your operating system. Like you don't normally list every single package you install on the system. You just list the ones that you care about, and then it figures out the rest, right? So to install this, it's a gem. So you can gem install Librarian Puppet, and its usage is simple. We tell it to install, and we give it a path to a Puppet file, and it'll tear through that install to us. The pros, it uses a Puppet file, so you have something in version control, which is like very handy, and it handles dependencies. The cons are that it handles dependencies. And so they're actually like using this with like 20 or so modules. I found that the metadata within the modules that I was using, which aren't just mine, they're coming from like disparate sources, the tool was basically unable to resolve them for me. And so I ended up having to put the things I didn't really like care about, but were dependencies, in my Puppet file, and it turned into like a huge nightmare for me. So my analysis is to use Puppet Librarian Simple, which is the next tool we'll talk about. But still big props to Tim, he does a ton of work in the Puppet community. So Librarian Puppet Simple was written by Dan Bodie, another ex-puppeteer and my hero for writing this. Just as I was like banging my head on the keyboard with Librarian Puppet, I did a search to see there must be a better tool so I don't have to write one, and Dan had just committed it like a few days ago to GitHub. So what Librarian Puppet Simple does is it just goes through your Puppet file, and it doesn't do any dependency handling whatsoever. So it's up to you to just know, here's the list of modules I use, and describe them in the Puppet file. So if you're coming from the world of all of my modules are in one repo, you already know what all your modules are. You just list them in here, you're good to go. The installation is the same. It's librarian puppet simple, and then the binary is the same name actually. We can actually take a look at that. Yeah. Okay, so this is my puppet file. Yeah. See, we've got a bunch of different modules there, as well as references. References could be a tag, it could be a branch, it could be things. It could be an entire like git shell. So I want to put a specific commit. So I'm going to run librarian puppet install those, and we see it's just going through that and it's just checking them all out, or like cloning them all and then like checking out the right version. And so it'll just speed through all that, and it throws them all under like modules, and now they're all checked out at the right like version. If I go into yeah, so it has the branch that I put in my Puppet file. Yeah, so we see the reference the same. So the pros, no dependency like management, and it uses a Puppet file, again, which is critical. The cons, no, I love it. I use this tool everywhere. Definitely recommend librarian Puppet simple to everyone. If you look at my repo with the Puppet file, I've got some other tooling in there that you check out. Like one of the things I do is have a rake task to run rake check on my Puppet file so that it doesn't have typos. The Puppet file is actually Ruby, and so well, you have to be able to parse it, or you can commit bad one, and then tools won't work. So you definitely want to check that. I also have a simple shell script to update it that runs git pull for me and runs the installer and then restarts Apache for my and again, all that stuff's on GitHub. So my analysis, again, like Dan's my hero. I love using the tool. Has anyone ever heard of R10K or using? Yeah. So that was written by Thibaut at Local Labs or Goldfinch. And so R10K is a very opinionated workflow on working with the Puppet code. And so what it does is it assumes that you have a modules repository. It's in Git, and what we're going to do is we're going to create an environment for every branch. And so the goal behind this is to allow your Puppet developers to very quickly create new topic branches. So for every ticket or thing that you want to fix, I just create a new branch, I work on that, I push my code, and then I don't have to have access to the Puppet master. So it's going to see there's a new branch and make that available as an environment. I can then run Puppet, like Puppet agent-d, right? I could say environment, fix it, and so now it's going to run in the fix it environment, which is mapped to the fix it branch that I just pushed to my repository. So again, to reiterate, I can quickly have different branches of the code, and then each branch gets an environment, so it creates a whole workflow for testing. Yeah, so the question is, with R10K, am I still going to need a separate repo for each module? And yes. Okay. So for installation, there's a module for that. So definitely just launch the module and it'll install R10K for you. Here's what the workflow looks like. I'm going to create a new branch called Fixit. I'm going to modify the Puppet file, and in the Puppet file, I'm probably telling it the reference is whatever branch I'm working on for a specific module. I might have to add some new modules there as well to get something to work. I'm going to commit that, and I'm going to push it to my new branch. And then on the Puppet master, we need to run R10K, and what it's going to do is see there's this new branch, and then it's going to do the checkout on the Puppet master to create that directory system for you. Obviously, you don't want everyone that's writing code to have access to the Puppet master, which this still needs. So what I've done is SSH keys, where the key only lets you run the R10K command. This is a bit hard to read, but my slides will be online later, and so you can simply put a key in IRA, set up an SSH config on your workstation, and then it makes it really easy. I just type SSH R10K, and then it deploys my environment. So my workflow, instead of getting on the Puppet master, my workflow is now, after I do my work, type SSH R10K, and then my environment's ready. You could also throw that into a rake task when you do like rake deploy. And it's just executing that R10K for you. So the pros, it makes it really easy to do development. There is a bit of a workflow to it, and it's a very opinionated workflow, and that it has specific steps. And so the hardest thing for me is just teach people what are the steps and just practice it. But once you've deployed a few times, it becomes really easy. You don't need access to the Puppet master, which is huge. When the team is like just you and the two people that sit near you, this probably isn't a big thing. But as Puppet grows in your organization, you definitely want more people to be able to access it. How many folks here are using Puppet right now? Yeah. And do you have it so that only your team has access to it? Yeah. And so ideally we could put that all on GitHub and make it open, and then we could keep all of our data separated from there and make that private. And whether it was open to the world or at least to your company at large, other folks should be able to see that Puppet code and send you contributions instead of it just being locked. And this tool will make it easy for them, or at least aid in them. So the cons, no, repo is also my hero. You do need a centralized Git repo for this to work. It's all based on Git, but hopefully you already have that. Yeah. So continued learning. Check out my modules, send me pull requests. I do my best to stay on top of those. I've got a set of modules that all work together and that do all the boring stuff that just has to be done on systems like PAM and SSH and MTP and SE Linux and all those things. For continued learning, I highly recommend, if you want to learn Ruby, to follow Factor and the pull request there. The facts are very small bits of Ruby code, and so if you're new to Ruby, I find it's an easy way to get going. How many folks code in Ruby today? No. So I've been using Puppet for years and working at Puppet Labs for clients for years before I really started doing anything with Ruby. So if you didn't raise your hand, don't feel like it's something else you have to conquer. because you can get a ton done without it. And usually the first time you do need it is probably to write a custom fact, which is why I recommend just looking at the facts, the really small pieces of it. And then I believe this is on the board earlier, but ask.puppetlabs.com is a great resource. I highly recommend signing up for the weekly digest. And so once a week I get a list of things that were posted there, and it's a great way to just keep up on what's going on with Puppet, as well as what issues are hitting the community. You can stay on top of that. I've got just a couple minutes left. Does anyone have any questions? Right out, sure. Slides aren't on the Puppet Forge, but they will be on SlideShare very shortly. Yeah.
And we will actually link to all of the slides, assuming the presenters can come to us, and we have video sessions now.
Do you know if R10K plays well with Git flow?
I do not. I don't know what Git flow is. So, get back.
Is using a different Git repo for every module, is that a standard recommended practice now?
So the question was, is it standard practice to use a Git repo for every module? And the answer is wholeheartedly yes.
Okay.
Please do that. Don't use the one big repo for all of your modules.
Okay. I'm also very disappointed that you didn't deliver the keynote with your headphones on.
I can't hear you.
You know the picture that you have on all the modules on Puppet Forge?
Yeah.
With the headphones on? I'm surprised that you didn't deliver your keynote with your headphones on.
Yeah. I'm also less purple in real life.
You mentioned training material for RSpec. Do you currently offer training for server spec?
I do not. I'm not sure what Bubble Labs is doing in that regard. So I would find Bubble Labs to chat with them about that.
Do you sometimes see people drive their R10K deployment like post-receive folks or something like that? Or is it usually more manually driven, kind of like you described? I shouldn't say manually, but you know what I mean. Like,
So the question was, do I see people using post-commit hooks to manage R10K? Wholeheartedly, yes. You should definitely go down that route. I was showing a simpler way to do it here, but post-commit hooks for sure.
R10K, both flavors of librarian, do they integrate with Please Don't Mock Me Subversion?
R10K, I'm not sure if that does or not. Does anyone know? No.
I think it's like a beta, like trying to make it work thing out there if you go for it.
Yeah, so I'm not sure about that. The other tools don't actually care. Like, they're just looking for the Puppet file. And so wherever, however you keep the Puppet file, it just works off of that. So it doesn't care about the version control at all. But if you want, I've got a quick 15-minute thing that I can do, and I can teach you Git pretty break.
I know Git, it's other people on my team getting them to learn Git.
Yeah.
So Garrett, it's not officially supported yet, but Adrian is working on subversion support for RTK.
So there you go. SPAN support is coming your way. Any other questions or okay? Great. Well, thanks everybody.